Welcome everybody to today's webinar. Thank you for joining. I'm Pieter Van Schalkwyk and we'll talk about Gen AI and digital twins in 2024. So with Gen AI, Steve Howcroft, our COO, actually reminded me of this. When you look at something like Gen AI and the impact of that, what comes to mind is that it's almost like magic. So if you look at what's happened over the last year or so in this space, significant changes. And for me, it's not so much around the magic side of it. It is more the impact that it's got. So, and it reminded me of the book Who Moved My Cheese, where it's all about change and how we adapt to new things that are coming in. So in that story, when the cheese was moved, the target, the goal, the environment, some like the mice adapted very well, and some people didn't. And yeah, so this is kind of bringing that that thinking around what the impact of generative AI is, and if you combine that with digital twins and how it's changing the landscape. The changes that we see, especially in 2024, revolve around three main areas. The first one is we're seeing a groundswell of challenges around skills. So lack of skills, aging workforce, immaturity, and I'll drill down a little bit on that. But there's some significant challenges ahead in terms of getting people to work in manufacturing. Likewise, with the acceleration of AI, and we've seen a lot of things like co-pilots and that happening last year. This year, we'll see a lot of experimentation move into actual implementations and adding value. And it's not just the novelty factor anymore, but the applications that come out of it. And lastly, we also see that the Industry 4.0 digitalization is picking up a lot of momentum, but is it really adding a lot of value? And what we need to do in terms of to boost productivity, which is a key challenge in the industry, we've seen many of the developed countries are either stagnant or declining productivity. So how can we get more with less people, which is really what that statement is about. So those three things is creating this perfect storm for how I believe generative AI will disrupt how we work going forward. If I look at the change in workforce in the next 10 years, this is from Gartner, and I'll just summarize it into those three things. The workforce is actually growing slower than what the GDP is. The manufacturing workforce is shrinking in terms of real numbers, so getting people to come in and work in manufacturing and associated industries in the industrial side is actually shrinking. And one of the other statistics is that 1 in 4 people in the next 10 years, in the next decade, will actually be over 65. That is still in the workplace because of this lack of skills. Now, again, looking at some of the things that Gartner is saying around what are the type of jobs or tasks that we can automate, and the ones that are ideally suited to completely digitalized. You can see the bottom green in each of those: production, scheduling, quality. So these are the type of tasks that lend themselves to being automated to some degree. And I'll touch a little bit on how we at XMPro are looking at that part of the problem. So I think generative AI, people are saying, well, will this replace jobs? Will it put people out of work? Our real problem is we don't have enough people to do the work that we have. There's a decline, as I showed previously. But what was interesting, Sam Altman, CEO of OpenAI, which also owns ChatGPT, which has kind of skyrocketed this whole thing, made the statement that AI tools are very good at doing tasks, but terrible at doing jobs for now. So the focus of the AI tools is not to replace jobs, not to replace people, but to look at what are those tasks that we can actually automate and use generative AI to be able to support us in doing those tasks so we can get people to do some of the other more value-added tasks. So just on there, if you look at ChatGPT and how quickly this is on us, and this is fascinating if you look at how long it took Netflix to get to 1 million users, and Facebook and Instagram and ChatGPT. This is phenomenal. 180 million users, and they reckon there's about 100 million people signing in every week to use the service. So phenomenal with that. If you look at someone like Michael Dell, who's been around the industry for a really long time, and he's seen many, many waves, what he's saying is, so far, there's nothing that competes with what he's seeing on this, on what's happening with Gen AI. A really interesting stat that I saw from Mike Carroll, who's with Georgia Pacific, is how the productivity, which is really the output per hour, how that has changed over the last couple of years. You can see every time we add new technology, Internet of Things, all of that, we get more for the labor that we put in. The challenge that we have is this has gone completely flat. And his point is that the more we put just dashboards and analysis and putting BI over the information, we've not made any significant progress since we've done that. So what do we need to do to get a step change? And it reminded me something of the great crisis in London, New York, and places like that, where they said in 1894 that in 50 years London will be buried under 9 feet of manure. And there were conferences and a lot of debate, and what are we going to do, because we looked at the problem from the horse perspective. By 1912, Henry Ford got the way that we make cars into a repeatable process, and since then that problem has gone away. So not within the 50 years, but it completely changed. And I think Gen AI is that complete change that we're seeing. So this combination of the three trends that creates this perfect storm. And if you combine this with digital twins, the shift towards digital twins. So Dr. Michael Greaves explained, what he sees as an intelligent digital twin, which compared to traditional ways, which is passive, offline, goal-given, and predictive, he sees a digital twin which is active, always on agents, real-time goal-seeking versus then goal-given, and doing things like front-running simulations, being able to do that. So it's not, so to get back to kind of the cheese analogy, it is not a better mousetrap. It is a completely different way that we have to think. So it's not about the horse manure problem. It is about how do we change that whole dynamic and address creating the vehicle change that we need. So it's not smarter repositories with more data. If you ask anyone, they just want more data. It's not about measuring things like more KPIs or building better AI models or analytical models. It's about a whole shift, and that's what we are focusing on. So our focus and how I think Gen AI will impact digital twins is really in 3 areas. So how do we generate twins? So I call that generative twins. So how do I create a twin, right from getting the requirements, designing it, building it, testing it, and putting it in place. The second part is, how can I make it smarter? How can I put intelligence into it? Because there's a massive amount of information available in large language models, and the way that the ChatGPT type applications are developing, and the information that sits in there, billions and billions of data points that it's been trained on, much better than any user. So how can we use that to provide better co-pilots, help with advanced analytics and decision making and things like that? So how do we not just build them, but also create the intelligence? And then lastly, how can we get them to do some of these tasks and work for us? So we see this, and the term multi-agent generative systems are being raised at the moment by organizations like Gartner and other research. It is very new, but this is actually when you have multiple autonomous agents that work together in this goal-seeking approach, but they have to work with inside rules of engagement. So I'll quickly go into each of these and just give you a view on what they are and what we are doing as XMPro in this space. So the first one is, how do I create a digital twin? And the reason that we see, or the benefit of this is really quite often people are stuck at how do I get started. So it helps you with getting started. It helps you to collaborate around key objectives that your solution need to do, and don't wander off around one person's bias or a technology that's really interesting. It focuses around key objectives. It helps you build these things a lot faster. We anticipate around about a 50%, so we're still in testing all of this, but we anticipate around a 50% faster development overall, right from requirements gathering to get it into running. And it helps you sometimes to think out the box, because we are so trained and biased around, the world that we know, that similar to what they had in London, New York, and places like that previously. This is work in progress for us, so you'll see this being released throughout the course of the year, all the things that I'll be sharing with you. So looking at this generator process, we broke it down into 6 steps, so to get a co-pilot to help us. Defining the requirements, doing the data management, things like generative integration, how can it auto-discover APIs and actually build the mapping for me, come up with what are the recommendations that will help me to identify the problems and help me provide prescriptive analytics. Some ideas around what should be on the UX, how do I align that with the user stories, and then actually create the configuration, actually create in our instance, XMPro data stream configuration files, and some of the other artifacts that we need, the recommendation files, so that those can be imported into the process and help you speed up. So and also create documentation. And then lastly, make sure that we can put security and governance auditing, use this as an auditor to put that over this as well. So here's an example. This is inside XMPro. And again, I think this process is pretty generic. How we've implemented, or how we are implementing this, is there are multiple different use cases that you see here. You can see the 5 steps at the top. If I choose one of them, I can then go into it. There are the 6 objectives. And each of these will then take me through a series of questions and prompts. I can prompt and it can prompt me back. So if I look at, for example, identifying key objectives and challenges. So it'll start off by how do you describe the business or problems. And there's a set of questions built on our methodology that we have found very effective in working with customers. So how can we bring that and make that available to anyone who's trying to do this, in this instance for my cheese manufacturing organization? You can see a number of questions. And then at the end of it, for step 1, it'll start summarizing the results for me. So, but that is learning so that I can put this all together at the end and actually create that configuration file. So, and here are just some of the outputs of that. So once that is done, I can go into the next step of this process. So being able to generate twins, we anticipate about a 50% reduction in time. And again, this is new. It can help you identify unanticipated needs. It's one of the benefits that we saw out of it. Sometimes you don't think of it, and the intelligence that's in this agent allows you will ask you questions which you may not have thought of. And the real thing is that it can help you build digital twins around the real problem statement. Here's an example of what came out of a session like that, where this is the problem statement around the what, where, who, why, what is the problem, why you're doing it, how you're going to do this, who's it for, and what are the key benefits. It is really good at taking all of those questions from multiple inputs in different stakeholders and helping you to put this together. So that is how we build the twin. The next part is how do we put some intelligence into the twin? How do we create smarter twins? So we don't just build them, but now we make them smarter. And I know it's a cheesy story, but I'll get back to kind of the life of a day in the life of a cheese plant operator who's assisted by a co-pilot. And this co-pilot is really good as a process advisor, as you will see. So here's our stock standard dashboard for or digital twin representation of a cheddar manufacturing operation. And you can see across the top of the process, I can see different batches, where they are, what the status is, OEE, all the normal things that I like to see inside my normal application. At the top right, I have an advisor. If I click on that, it now opens up an area where it will actually look at what is currently there, what are the current instances, and what you'll see on the recommendation side, on the right-hand side. Out of the box, XMPro allows you to create recommendations with recommendation rules. And some of our customers have actually got millions of recommendations over 3 or 4 or 5 year period that they've gathered. We can interrogate this also with the digital twin. In this instance, looking at the process data, it can recommend what queries you may want to run, but I want to, and in this instance, I'm asking it, what pasteurization temperature and duration yielded the best result in the past. So I'm looking for this golden batch in all my previous ones and see if so that I can build a solution around, or a golden batch approach. So it will then interrogate the data that is sitting inside our application, and this is and it provide me different ways of demonstrating and showing that information, whether I want it graphed or, and again, this is all built into how I can ask it certain questions around this. I may see that there's an issue with the pasteurization. So you can see at the top there's a red box that shows me there's an issue. So that pops up, and that's all part of our standard recommendations. You don't have to do anything to get that functionality. There's no AI involved in that. You can, if you want, put some AI into the recommendations, but those are stock standard recommendations. What it tells me, there's an issue with this machine. I can now go in and I can use traditional AI, where I do remaining useful life and run regression models and classification models and all those things, which is again standard in XMPro. You can get that right now. There are some previous webinars that discuss that. In this instance, what I'd like to do, and having it trained on our own company data, our own operations manuals, our own recommendations, I can now start interrogating this. So show me the temperature trend around this for the last 12 months, and with some interpretations of what does it mean. So 2 instances where had anomalies or whatever the case might be. And then lastly, show me this in a plot or something. These are all natural language questions you can ask on your data at any point in time. So that's adding intelligence to the digital twin. Now just imagine, so this is a water treatment plant. You can see there's a camera with video on the side that actually, just imagine what it's like if you could get that advisor to interpret what is actually happening in that video and what does it mean. So building that expertise and becoming really, really valuable assets and workers in the organization. It's not just on the front end part of it, but XMPro has notebooks, and we've had this capability for a while where I plug in ChatGPT and I can do my analysis inside a notebook, which is where data scientists, engineers, and people like that like to take the XMPro data and build models or evaluate or look for things. And in this instance, I can ask it a question. So in a notebook using XMPro, there's I can ask it how do I create a correlation matrix, and again, this is how it creates the Python code for me. I run it then in the notebook, and here there's my visualization. I don't know how to write the code to actually create a correlation matrix. ChatGPT did that for me. So that's the other area of a co-pilot. It's not just about your data, but also how to help you create more intelligence or better questions. So again, looking at this, we anticipate around about a 25% productivity improvement for people using this. It should actually be more, but it also help you better decisions, lower cost, better employee satisfaction, and it helps to create the self-service analysis instead of going to an IT organization and get them to write you a SQL with a report that sits behind it. So that self-service analysis is really coming to the front. The last part is around how Gen AI will impact digital twins in 2024 is now it should do the work. Not only do we create it, we make it smart, but how can we get multi-agents to do this? Now, this is really at the forefront of where research and everything is. It's a fascinating area. I personally believe this is the area where there's most value, because we're taking the robot out of people and making the world more human. And that is according to Leslie Wilcox at London School of Economics. I love it in terms of what that approach means. For XMPro, we've seen that decision intelligence is not just about dashboards, which is the support, or the decision augmentation, which is kind of bringing in these co-pilots, but how can we actually get, in certain operating conditions, the application to, or the digital twin to run in a safe operating environment for certain tasks, actually perform those tasks autonomously in a lights out way. And we see this going from an informant approach to a performant solution going forward. So just imagine that cheese factory again. And in this cheese factory, I've got multiple agents. Now, in a traditional rule-based system, I would have to write all the rules. With what we're doing is the production agent, the process agent, quality agent, safety agent have large language models behind them. So they are really smart around how to interact, how to plan, and they have a lot of knowledge around cheese, they have a lot of knowledge around safety, and they collaborate amongst each other in order to achieve certain tasks. Now, if you expand that, it's not just about the production process, but I could have the same in the goods receiving, packaging, and functional safety. And I do need to put some rules around it. So these bots or agents need to interact with each other in that they're virtual bots or agents that interact with each other in a collaborative way, and they use large language models as their way of interacting and deciding what to do next. And we then put the rules around to say within these rules you are allowed to interact with each other. And I'll get back to some of what these mean. This is how we see the factories of the future, where there's certain tasks of this that can be done, and they can optimize a large number of variables. They're always on goal seeking, and they can reason like humans in a way. This capability of machines being able to manage more variables has been proven by MIT at the machine intelligence for manufacturing operations side. I suggest that you have a look at that. But machines are much better at optimizing a large number of variables to what a human is. There's research done at places like Stanford and Google DeepMind and others around this agent-based approach. How can agents use large language models as their way, and we don't have to build all these rules around them? They can discover. This is an example of, and these are real bots, so this is the physical. What we are doing is the virtual. How do we build the digital twin versions of this? But these are 8 bots that interact with each other. They clean a room, and their focus is, without having procedural descriptions at the back, but using large language models on what I should do, what the task is, how to break it down, how to actually perform it. Fascinating stuff. Again, if you're interested, have a look at AutoRT at Google DeepMind. This is not what we're doing. We're doing this around digital twins. How can I create a virtual approach that is similar to that? How can I get the digital twin to actually run it instead of having robots running around? And what we've done at XMPro, come up with a architecture which is ideally suited to our stream hosts and how we build applications right now. So we have data streams and stream hosts and the infrastructure that we can plug these agents who can interact with each other. They can use XMPro listeners, they can perceive. In the middle, we have the actual, we train them on your company's specific domain knowledge. They have large language models for their broader understanding, and there's reinforcement learning to make sure that when they reflect and plan, that they learn from what they do, like we do as humans, like we do as when a new person starts in our business. It's exactly the same process. And then the actions could be recommendations, so advising, or we can actually actuate and switch things on and off. So that's the future. This is where we're heading. And as I said, XMPro ideally suited to do this because we already have the infrastructure, event-based architecture. So we are event-driven, and we have data streams and data and a platform where we can plug these things in. This is all work from around the core of digital twins. So we have the digital twins. We're building the generative agents to be able to use the digital twins to interact and do this algorithmic business. And then what we're also doing is make sure that we have the rules of engagement in a computable way, so the agents can actually understand it. So what are the rules of engagement? And some of them may follow things like deontic rules or more. So without these rules, you can't play. It's the most important part actually of this whole thing, is how do we make sure that we set that up. And the way that we do that, same outline, but it's the obligations, prohibitions, permissions, delegations, all of those kind of policies, and how that applies, and how do we make it machine readable and interpretable and enforced by the multi-agent. So again, in the multi-agent environment, we're not trying to automate not the job but the task. So let's say I've got 2 agents, they need to fill the milk tanks, they need to consider power, milk levels, electricity prices, maintenance schedules, production. So between the operations agent and the reliability agent, they need to negotiate. They may have competing objectives, and they need to negotiate around when to fill. We may then also later on introduce a quality agent. So again, how do we introduce this without procedural rules that sit at the back, so that we can address that challenge? And XMPro can cover this whole spectrum, this whole continuum from one end to the other end, starting with where a lot of organizations start. So you don't have to start at the right-hand side, start on the left-hand side and incrementally increase and build the capability towards that area where you can cover the whole spectrum of what you need to support people, to augment the decisions, and to take so again, in terms of the impact of this, it is massive. I personally believe this is the biggest thing we can do in this industry, is to help with that initial skills gap, and the productivity challenge is to take some of the tasks that are repetitive and don't add value and help address them by helping to build, helping to make it smarter, and helping to automate the whole process. Thank you very much. I hope this has made sense. For us, the cheese hasn't moved. We know where it is. We are going after it. Unfortunately, we've run out of time, so there won't be time for questions. But please contact me if you're interested in exploring how we can help you with this kind of problem and how this could fit into your organization. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time and look forward to seeing you on a future webinar.